Thank you all for coming to this important event. I am a mother. Physically, is this working?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Physically, I came upon the title easily, but emotionally, I was transformed into this role on the backs of birds. My journey began with many privileges, among them health, a husband who insists on doing his own laundry and might possibly be the most considerate man on earth, fulfilling work as a registered nurse, friends and bounty, and a soon-to-be refurbished home, as well as a bedrock family that consisted of my 2 brothers, sister, mother, and father. Much of my joy and anticipation around the impending arrival of my only child was intimately tied to the joy and anticipation I envisioned my mother and father experiencing. I imagined Grandma and Grandpa taking delight in their grandchild in every way, large and small. But this was not to be. My father, Robin, passed away unexpectedly 2 days before my 20-week ultrasound. As you can imagine, this starkly changed everything for me and my family. To say that my father was a special person whom I adored feels like an epic understatement. He would sing Becker Boo's Eyes So Blue, Oh How I Do Love You. He would happily spend an entire weekend crafting the most accurate papier-mâché eagle possible for a 5th grader. And as I got older, he would watch me pull out of the driveway every time I left home. After his death, I foolhardily set to thinking that I simply had to make it to the finish line of birth. And I can hear anyone out there who's already a mother chuckling at the notion. In many ways, birth is just the introduction to your new life. Perhaps it was a way to cope, but on the practical side, I had to keep up every precious hour of earned time at work for maternity leave. I had to maintain, I had to carry on, and grief would have to wait. On a cold February day in 2016, our daughter, Wren, arrived, wholly befitting of her name. She was petite, at only 5 pounds. She had soft brown coloring and a bright, energetic song. I marveled at our stunning little songbird. The days and nights passed as I tried to learn how to care for our daughter, and the experience took little to no pity on me. My husband had to return to work within days after her birth. My mother was grieving the loss of her husband of 47 years, and my sister had her own life and a full-time job to contend with. There was no mother or sister or friend who was available to stay for weeks at a time. And it just felt, in some ways, in many ways, I was running this new gauntlet alone. My little bird was almost immediately and always ill, crying, shrieking, quivering, refusing to eat. She had severe recurrent ear infections that often led to respiratory illness. Maternity leave felt more like a forced march of deprivation rather than a period of wonder and renewal. Out of necessity, I returned to work at 12 weeks to a rigorous, unforgiving job, and the unkind nights and illnesses continued. But my husband and I endured, and we took delight in our baby girl in every way we could. I could get lost stroking the side of her cheek or smoothing the curls at the nape of her neck. When she was 8 months old, my fragile 11-pound baby girl had tubes put in her ears. We were getting ready to move into our home, and I wouldn't say the sun had blasted through the clouds, but it was bashfully poking through. And I was so very thankful for little victories. And even though she was still frequently ill, she began to feel better and seemed to be in less pain now that the infections had an avenue of escape. I still had not had time to process the loss of my father. I continued at breakneck pace, trying to work and care for my daughter. I didn't see that there was any alternative. The finality and immenseness of my father's death would catch up with me at times, particularly at night. It felt as if the experience would politely lie dormant during the day and then shapeshift into a chaotic, nocturnal marching band. When Ren was 10 months old, I received a call from the father of my dear, close friend of 23 years. He told me only that she had become sick and was in the hospital, and I went to her. She was not just sick, she was dying of organ failure from sepsis, the cause of which still remains unknown. And I had a true out-of-body sensation. I thought to myself, wasn't I just here with my dad? I was just here. And I tried to take in the scene of life support equipment and tubing and monitors and all the associated sounds and smells. And now I sat watching these lovely people who I had known for most of my life watch their own child slip away. And it occurred to me in the most dramatically painful way that now, with this child of my own, my heart would forever be beating, raw and exposed on the outside of my chest. I bore witness to my father's passing, but at least there was a natural order to the chronology of that. The day-to-day became a brutal slog, and I found myself placed squarely back in the same situation. There simply was not the luxury, time, space, or energy for grief. I was using every available resource to survive physically and emotionally. We had been hemorrhaging money, paying for daycare that Ren wasn't attending due to illness, me missing work and having no earned time to recoup that income. I had to get back to it. And so I did. And this is where my recollection of events may differ from those around me during that period of time. But I hold tight to the thought that considering the circumstances, I was doing reasonably well. I was reliable. I was doing at least an adequate job at work. I wasn't doing anything destructive. I wasn't drinking or using drugs. I wasn't neglecting any of my obligations. I was exhausted. Yeah. And I always felt a hair's breadth away from crashing waves gaining enough strength to become a tsunami. But I persisted. I began to hear almost daily, "You look so tired. You look so thin." And many well-intentioned people offered to take Ren here or there for several hours at a time. But this did not feel realistic to me. I was breastfeeding. She was frequently ill. I just didn't feel I could say to my husband, who was working so hard and such long hours, "Hey, this person that you don't know and have never met is going to take our infant daughter for 6 hours on Saturday." It just felt wrong. And somehow, if I'm being honest, to take anyone up on that felt like an affirmation of being a complete failure as a mother. It felt like added pressure to me and to my marriage. But we carried on. We were approaching Ren's first birthday, a milestone of survival, to be sure. And I arrived home one day from a particularly intense day at work to find a large, bright green envelope taped to my front door. And as I walked up to the front door, I found a notice from Child Protective Services. And the notice informed me that CPS had stopped by to conduct a home visit. I was overcome with fear and bewilderment. In that moment, I became a wounded animal, a wounded mother. My mind tried desperately to make some kind of sense out of the situation. It was a generic form. My name wasn't on it. Maybe it was left at the wrong house. Maybe someone had a vendetta against me. And realizing it was past 5 p.m. and I would have no answers that night, I collapsed outside the front door. I crumpled over the car seat and I began trembling so hard I could not get the key in the lock. My daughter began to sob, and I just had nothing left to cope with. Not an extra minute of sleep, not an extra breath, not an extra pound, not an extra rational thought. I was annihilated. We much later found out that the inquiry was launched by a third-party report of someone's apparent concern for me and how I was managing, as opposed to an allegation of harm or neglect to rent. I was subsequently asked more times than I care to recall if we owned firearms. Was I going to kill myself? I had never expressed suicidal ideation. We did not own guns then, and we do not own guns now. I was told that I had an adjustment disorder, and I really wondered, how does one properly, gracefully adjust to birth, death, grief, illness, exhaustion? How does one properly adjust to the expanse of motherhood? What I was never asked was what would be helpful for me or my family. And however well-meaning the original intention may have been, it did not change the fact that we had to endure a stunningly painful period of investigation. And it colored my every thought of myself as a human being, as a wife, as a mother, as a nurse, as a woman. It goes on and on. Only days after receiving the CPS inquiry, Ren came down with pneumonia and required hospitalization. While she was in the hospital, I also became ill with fever and vomiting. And as my daughter struggled to breathe, swimming in her adult-sized hospital bed with her oxygen and IV tubing, I was retching into a trash can outside her room. I have been completely dismantled in every way. And this was the bleakest time, but it was also the exact time that I began to be reconstructed by my daughter. She had taken me to her foundry and forged me into someone stronger than I ever knew possible. The privilege of becoming Ren's mother, and I do consider it a privilege, was a true baptism by fire. I am forever grateful to my little bird. She is my greatest teacher, my greatest transformer. Her love and humor expand me daily. If you know a mother or father out there who may be struggling, please reach out to them directly. Ask them what would be helpful. Don't assume you know the solution. And whether you receive a tangible answer or not, this simple act of inquiry is a show of support. And for those of you who may be in a period of deconstruction in your motherhood journey, please know you have all the components you need to be put back together again. I promise you, a more robust, tenacious, gritty version of yourself than you ever thought possible will emerge. I can tell you, sitting in this audience a year ago, I would have never dreamt I'd be standing on this stage sharing my story. And in regards to the grief, speaking to you all today, it feels like progress. It feels like transparency. It feels like realness. And it feels like kicking ass. Thank you.